afternoon. Thank you for joining NVTC for our Masters of Leadership in Tech series. Please welcome NVTC Chairman and the Founder, Chairman, and CEO of Attain Partners, Greg.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I'm delighted to welcome you to today's Masters of Leadership event featuring CareJourney's President, Aneesh Chopra. It's great, by the way, it's great to see so many of you in the social lounge networking before the program, although many of you, I'm sure, noticed I didn't get a chance to get to a lot of your tables. So I hope to see you there after this program's over. As one of the nation's largest tech councils, NVTC continues to shape the prominence of our national capital region as a leading tech hub. NVTC serves companies from all sectors of our industry, the tech industry, from small businesses to startups, all the way to Fortune 100 tech companies, as well as service providers, academic institutions, and nonprofit organizations. As many of you know, NVTC's mission is to accelerate tech innovation and promote world-class tech workforce development to create a thriving tech ecosystem in our region here. Now, today's Masters of Leadership Tech series is made possible by a lot of sponsors, and I'll start with our platinum sponsor, Attain Partners, Consumer Technology Association, Mantech, Virginia Tech, and now to our silver sponsors, CNSI, CoreSite, and Uninet. Our PR and marketing advisor, Merit Group, and finally, our media partners, iHeartMedia, Scoop News Group, and the Washington Technology. Thank you all for your support, and a special thank you, of course, to our business and academic partners. Their support enables us to provide year-round content and programming. And they are, as you can see on the slide here, Booz Allen Hamilton, CIT, the Center for Innovative Technology, the Consumer Technology Association, Deltec, Dominion Energy, George Mason University, Innova, KPMG, Maximus, Microsoft, Nobless, Northrop Grumman, Old Dominion University, PenFed Credit Union, Pillsbury, PNC, SAIC, Venable, Verizon, Virginia Tech, our policy sponsor, our advisor, Hutton Andrews Kurth, and our marketing agency advisor, O2KL. Thank you all for your support. Now, let's turn to the program. It's my privilege and honor to introduce today's distinguished speaker and, of course, our moderator, Bruce Caswell. Aneesh Chopra, let's talk about you for a minute here. The president of CareJourney, an open data membership service providing a trusted, transparent rating system for physicians, networks, facilities, and markets on the move to value. Earlier in his career, he served as Virginia's Secretary of Technology, as well as our nation's first Chief Technology Officer under President Obama. He is the author of a riveting book called The Innovative State, How New Technologies Can Transform Government, which was published in 2014. That same year, Aneesh's claim to fame skyrocketed. And I have to tell you, I love this. When on the Jon Stewart show, when Jon Stewart of The Daily Show crowned him as the Indian George Clooney. And just take one look at him and you can see why he was tagged that name. Aneesh serves on the board of the Healthcare Cost Institute, the New Jersey Innovation Institute, and is a graduate of Harvard's Kennedy School of Government and the Johns Hopkins University. Now, let me turn to our moderator. He is a close friend and colleague of mine, Bruce Caswell, the president and CEO of president and CEO of Maximus, as well as NVTC's first vice chair and fellow classic car enthusiast. Yes, he and I really enjoy classic cars. Bruce is well-known and respected leader who has served a dedicated more than 25 years delivering complex solutions to federal and state and provincial governments. In March of this year, many of you know that Bruce and I announced that the Maximus acquisition of a portion of my company, our federal business. With the purchase of Attain Federal, Maximus further accelerated its digital transformation offerings and continued expansion into the federal market. He too, like me, we are Maryland residents, but enjoying the Northern Virginia community because of its rich tech ecosystem. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Bruce and Aneesh, and so please join me in extending a warm welcome to the two of them. Bruce?
Great. Thank you so much, Greg. Quite an introduction, and I will say
we're done. We're done. That was it.
I think that's it. I think we'll just drop the mic and let's move on. I have to say, folks, it is a thrill to be able to spend this time with you and with Aneesh Chopra. I have admired Aneesh's career throughout my career, his ability to seamlessly traverse the public sector and the private sector, the impact that this individual has had on so many aspects of where we're headed as a country in terms of technology, and we're going to get into some of that today. So I have to tell you, every time I spend time with Aneesh, I come away energized, and I know that you will as well today. So this next hour should be just fantastic. So let's jump right into it. As Greg mentioned, Aneesh, you were the first chief technology officer for the U.S. government and served under President Obama, and you created whitehouse.gov, among other things. Tell us a little bit about, we'll begin the conversation by kind of going a little bit back in time. Tell us what it was like during that time, leading change, how easy or hard it was to modernize the White House, and then maybe give us a sense of how you feel the Biden administration sees that today. So they're obviously coming at it from on a larger platform and with a lot of accomplishments in the rearview window. But how would you see the challenges that they face as well?
Yeah, Bruce, thank you for the opportunity. Greg, love the introduction, and maybe I'll dive into this in three parts. Let me do a little bit of pre-White House, the experience, and then forecasting in the Biden years. So as many of you know, I had the honor and privilege of serving in the Kaine administration as Secretary of Technology, which in the world of laboratories of democracy, Justice Brandeis, states were leading the way. Now remember, Virginia had a bipartisan tradition about promoting the role of technology leadership at a statewide level. In fact, we were the first state under then Governor Jim Gilmore, Republican, to introduce the notion of a cabinet secretary position led by our friend Don Upson. So when I had the chance to serve in the Kaine years, we basically had a playbook, and we had a playbook of three parts. One, we wanted to make sure we were growing our region's economy. We wanted to market and celebrate and encourage entrepreneurship and to recruit companies to build their innovation divisions within the Commonwealth of Virginia. And I think that had been a big part of our change. What can we do to build the brand, if you will? Governor Warner, as you know, pivoted a little bit towards more of an operational efficiency. How do we strengthen the technical capacity of the Commonwealth, and entered into a landmark public-private partnership that really set the stage for how to address cybersecurity at scale, how to treat IT essentially outside of the traditional budgeting cycle. And we had a lot of implementation work to do during the Kaine years. And so we knew we had to take on a role of that sort. And then I think the key was that Governor Kaine had his own point of view, which is he wanted a role in Secretary of Technology to be a collaborator. Governor Kaine often referred to me as a chief collaboration officer, more so than a chief Secretary of Technology. And the theory was there were priorities that were important to the governor on modernizing our healthcare system, improving our educational outcomes, addressing the transportation crisis, if you recall, and of course, preserving and expanding our beautiful lands and the environment. So the question was, how can we partner the best of our technology capacity with the policy objectives in these other domains? And so with that backdrop, Bruce, when it comes to the question of leadership in the Obama White House, there was a lot of the let's scale up what we learned in Virginia. So it was not like we were starting from scratch. I will also say nothing beats air cover from the most powerful person in the world, the President of the United States, who created the role of Chief Technology Officer as a day one action in the midst of the economic crisis. Before I was even appointed, he made a statement that he wanted to open up and modernize our government, and declared in an executive memorandum that he would create a chief technology officer who would partner with the CIO and the budget director to make our government more transparent, more participatory, more collaborative. So what does it mean? Well, a couple things. I had to live up to that philosophy of collaborator, because once again, the president had a brilliant mind in Larry Summers and Tam Geithner thinking through the economy, and they might want my advice on broadband or other matters of entrepreneurial policy. He had a brilliant healthcare team, and he wanted to make sure that Secretary Sebelius and Nancy Ann DeParle had a partner that could make sure that as we went to implement not only the expansions of access and tax credits, but we modernized the system, we could open up more data for healthcare performance improvement, make sure that we had interoperable health records, and so forth. So the layup here, Bruce, I didn't have to exert a lot of personal leadership. I had to execute the plan that the president laid out. Now, here's the fun part. This may be useful for our friends who maybe engage Washington, but may not necessarily get into the details about how it operates. One of the unique roles that I had was I served actually as an assistant to the president. And Bruce, what that means is that the president has a choice. There are 25 senior advisors to the president who report directly to the president. And process-wise, that means if there's ever an issue or a disagreement, even amongst the cabinet or senior staff, an assistant to the president can essentially pull the andon cord and say, we're not moving forward with this, I disagree. And it would be up to the president, if needed, to weigh in on disagreements. And it was a statement that a chief technology officer role, which didn't exist, would be in that category. That was an uniquely Obama approach, because he put a lot of premium on this. And what that would mean is, as a practical matter and for fun, Bruce, I would wake up every morning, head over into in the White House compound. There was a meeting of the senior staff in the Roosevelt room, catty corner from the Oval. And so literally in the middle of the economic crisis, you'd have our chief of staff, Rahm Emanuel, go line by line across each of the 20 or so folks that were interested in this to get perspectives about what's happening, what needs help, what needs attention, coordination, how do we all align? Leadership, the funny part about that leadership, Bruce, is I got more done in the 10 minutes before the meeting and the 15 minutes post-meeting that would have otherwise taken weeks and weeks to get on calendars and do this, that, and the other. It's a very productive environment. But leadership was making sure that we took advantage of the president's commitment to create air cover for change. So much of this was just breaking the wall of disbelief, the notion that we can't somehow modernize, we can't take advantage of these new technologies. And by having the president make such a statement, it made the role that much easier to execute. And we had a lot of fun. We'll get into some of that, I'm sure, throughout our discussion. Now, funny thing, of course, you walk in on day one, I can't use social media when I get into the White House. The computers are locked down. We were on Internet Explorer version 6. As you recall, that was buggy. So we couldn't it had all these security risks. I couldn't access anything. So I was literally like with a dead phone, a dead computer, barely, word processing. So I was like, it's 2009. What are we doing, people? I can't get anything done. And we had to slowly but surely make our way through. Now, what does that mean? I think the Biden administration, an interesting story. We sort of skipped over the Trump team. Trump administration had a similar, commitment. May not have been as much of a priority to the president personally, but Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, made this a big initiative. In fact, he took on the responsibility for the Office of American Innovation, which actually held a lot of the work that I had been focused on. And so there was a bipartisan commitment to build on what we started. And you saw that he signed the Open Government Data Act and a number of other policies that really advanced how we advantage technology, data, and innovation for public good. Now, you asked me the question about where we think the Biden administration is heading. I think there are a couple of critical areas that we've already heard from the president. On day one, he has declared that understanding equity and ensuring a government that works for everyone would be a priority up and down the chain. And many of you who support the agencies know he directed a new equitable data working group on day one. Every program would be understood by race, ethnicity, income status, veteran status, disability status, and other demographic factors. So there's an immediate call to action to improve data quality. So you can't manage what you can't measure. So we're going to see a lot more, unfortunately, challenging issues like the people that need the help the most may be the ones least likely to be enrolled in program A, B, or C. So you've already got commitments from the Biden team on building on the data progress. We also see in the various debates on the recovery portfolio, now that we've got several bills cooking, infrastructure and a future potential recovery package, plus the one that's already passed, we saw an unprecedented $3 billion capital infusion, one-time capital infusion. I don't know if Congressman Connolly gets all the credit, but we love Congressman Connolly, and so I assume he had his hands in this in some form or fashion. And of course, Senator Warner, Senator Kaine. We have a delegation to rival anyone in the country to bring leadership here. We now have this one-time capital fund in the Biden administration to upgrade a lot of legacy tech that had a hard time justifying the capital spend in a traditional budget cycle to get going. So we're going to see leadership there. And then finally, we see a very clear commitment that we've got to improve digital services for the American people. We've just launched this new child tax credit, which for the first time will give millions of Americans, tens of millions of hundreds of millions of Americans access to a benefit that didn't exist before. That will be delivered in a modern way. And so we're going to see more digital services delivery to access the benefits, either new or existing benefits, to help people build back better, as the president says. So that's my quick overview of past, present, and I hope a prelude into the future.
Indeed. Well, thanks, Aneesh. That's fantastic. And you've given us a lot to kind of branch off on. I think that folks attending today might be interested to hear maybe a little bit more, if you have it, on the $3 billion one-time capital infusion. Where's that directed? Is it specific agencies? Is there a prioritization on legacy tech that's particularly outdated or that's critical to maybe helping achieve some of the other initiatives around, for example, equity? Give us a little bit more if you can.
Yeah, so this is like startup entrepreneurship capital, okay? So, let me give you a little bit of history, then I'll get into this. For those of you in Virginia who might remember this, very small, but the outgoing Warner budget had about $4 million, not million, for a similar kind of modernization idea. It was not tied to budget. It was not tied to a specific menu of items. It was basically a broadly defined pool. And when we inherited this, because it was in the budget that the Kaine administration sort of inherited, we decided to make that into a program we called the Productivity Investment Fund. And the idea was there are 3 types of projects we wish to award. One, if you needed to take a legacy process that was maybe manually intensive or basically outdated tech that needed to be updated, which could improve efficiency, we would front load the cash, but you had to pay it back. It may not have had to be paid back in a year. It might take 3 years, but you're going to commit to a payback. So the productivity idea was front load the capital, capture the savings, pay back what we gave you, and if you have excess quote unquote profit, that's for the agency to reuse. Number one. Number two, if you had something that would advance a mission objective that you stated as a priority, like we're going to enroll, save 100,000 acres in land through land preservation. If you had an initiative that would advance the objective better, faster, cheaper than we otherwise would get there, that could be funded and then deprecated, meaning you wouldn't have to pay it back. You're accelerating a very high priority outcome. And we also wanted to improve customer satisfaction. So if there's some ways to score wait times and so forth, and we can show improvement, we too may deprecate. Think of that. And that portfolio, by the way, had I think a 7-to-1 ROI, Bruce, if I did the math. Silly things like we paid the state tax department was given some money to digitally scan checks. Who knew that wasn't being done? Like they were otherwise physically hiring a secured guard to drive checks to the bank across the street to then unload to deposit. I don't know what we were doing, but this simple digitization process saved them a ton of money. So too did we on the mail sorting equipment. We had random stuff. The $3 billion technology modernization fund feels to me like a similar portfolio. Mm-hmm. If an agency has legacy process, it costs us, I think we did the math in Virginia, $100 of labor to process a single Medicaid application. Actually, Bruce, this is part of your world. So we did a time and motion study, not the real call centers, but more like the
eligibility support work,
the funding to support staff.
Yeah.
What if we said, hey, look, let's move more to the digital channel, and if we could get that down to a net of $50 or $25, could we borrow a $500,000, or in this case, it's a $3 billion fund? Could we get the equivalent of a $100 million project, fund the modernization, and then repay the savings over time? That is the core of the model, a repayment tied to efficiency gains that forces you to deliver the IT to deliver an outcome versus I met the requirement, the technology does what it does, even if there isn't savings on the other end. So that's key. There is a political debate about whether there are certain categories of projects that should be deprecated, meaning you don't have to pay them back. There's been no final answer on that, but that's part of the mix. And I think that's why I brought up this subject, frankly, to allow the folks on the webinar today to think through, help your agency customers, help them help the people that they serve. Maybe you could turn into an ambassador to educate folks on the technology modernization fund, because the first round of applicants, Bruce, are already published, and it was like very limited demand or relatively lame. No offense to anybody, but I think they were like modest in their room for improvement, right? Yeah. So we've got to go on a sales roadshow to come up with projects that could meet the objectives of this unprecedented capital investment, so that Congress doesn't look back and say, we did all this, but there was nothing to modernize. That, because we know the answer is there's a lot to do.
Well, maybe something we could do, since let's move to the next topic, but something we could do as a follow-up for the attendees on today's webinar is provide a little bit more information on that fund and the initial applications and whatever's publicly available, so that folks can, to your point, become ambassadors with their customers and draw their attention to the availability of these funds. That's great.
I'll put that
that'd be great. Okay, awesome. Let's pivot. You chair the George Mason University President's Innovation Advisory Council. It sounds very interesting. We'd like to learn more. Can you tell us a little bit about it, what the plans are for the council, and then also just your sense of the impact that it could have on the region? I know that this is linked to a lot of the activities around the region with the growth in the technology workforce and so forth, so public-private collaboration. So tell us a little bit more about that.
I'm a big fan of President Washington's, and I'm excited to be on the team and grateful for the chance to support the cause. This is a big deal, Bruce. I want to put this in context. We've long had, dating to the time I've known you, we've gotten to know NVTC, we've planted the flag that Virginia will be not just a regional leader, but a global leader on technology and innovation. We are, right? We are the hub for the internet. We had home to so many big companies that have scaled in this world. The decision for Amazon to bring HQ2 to market unlocked two, I think, regional economic game changers. An investment in Virginia Tech to create a PhD program focused on computer science that would put us on the map as potentially one of the top centers in the world, depending on how that program launches. And with George Mason to strengthen our computer science college graduates, so that we can fill all of these, I don't know about you, but I'm having a hard time filling engineers at CareJourney. We have 75 people, we got openings. Any engineer on the call who wants a job, call me, we're hiring. It's really hard to fill. And what I'll tell you is that if we take a step back, we've known forever that these are needs, and we've always had committees and hearings and incremental tweaks to this and focus the attention on that. And God bless the good energy, it's all needed. But the decision that Amazon's, the benefit of the Amazon selection is that it unlocked this, $500 million of capital that wasn't otherwise planned to be invested in this community. Let's maximize the value. So President Washington is keen to understand that for Mason, we want to listen to the needs of the community. We want to engage in how to make sure that every potential area of value creation we can build on together. And that could mean finding programmatic areas to recruit faculty and to dedicate some of the training materials. I'm biased towards healthcare IT, but I think objectively speaking, we're home to not one, not two, but $3 billion companies that did not exist 10 years ago. 3 born in this region. 2 of them, my neighbors here in Ballston, Privia and Evolent, and the other one being Aledade up the street in Maryland. So we've got sector-specific opportunities that may mean more of a dedicated curriculum on areas like cybersecurity or autonomous systems, or I don't want to speak for President Washington about that, but there's feedback coming in about what it could look like. In addition, what does the physical innovation center look like, Bruce? We're going to have this unbelievably gorgeous, prime real estate downtown Arlington, right there in the Virginia Square area. And how might that be a beacon? Just like CIT is sort of envisioning the sort of future of the Commonwealth and the country, going back 20 plus years, what would the a new building like this look like? And so we've got a very interesting public-private partnership, potential for new tenants to come in, and a chance to really put a flag in the ground to say we're going to create a real vibrant ecosystem physically that will spawn new businesses, strengthen the effectiveness of companies that already exist, and on and on and on. So I'm honored to have the chance to help be a part of the team and eager to get more feedback as we succeed, hopefully on the mission objectives.
Well, that's great. And I will echo your praise for President Washington. I think he's doing an amazing job. And we at NVTC have had the privilege of his participation, obviously, at a high level with the executive committee and so forth, and on the shaping of the strategy of the organization. And it's very exciting to see the role that George Mason will be able to play in creating the workforce of the future as the region's economy continues to develop, and hopefully help us address some of those labor shortages that you mentioned in a number of areas. And it is great also, I want to say that all the university partners of NVTC are fantastic because they each play different roles, as you've said, in the broader ecosystem. So the Virginia Tech role, as well as George Mason and others. And I think that's one of the things that makes NVTC such a unique technology council, is the ability to interact and to have the interplay with the academic community at a very pragmatic level, where leaders of companies can have conversations about what the curriculum of the future needs to look like in order to provide the workforce of the future that's needed. And similarly, we can really help students that are coming through the program with opportunities that we create through internships and other things to give them the practical experience that they need in today's economy. So with that commercial aside, tell us a little bit about CareJourney. You're 6 years in, I think, to that effort.
Yeah.
And how does CareJourney fit into both kind of the broader presidential level initiatives around open data and kind of facilitating the ecosystem of companies that can make use of very valuable government data and so forth, and also obviously the continued growth of the region?
So Bruce, I have a philosophy of change, which gets to the leadership conversation, that the next decade will likely hinge on the success of public-private collaboration. Not necessarily public-private partnerships. That's a broad term that might mean one vendor gets picked to build the HOV lanes so that's useful financial engineering. But public-private collaboration is more of a one-to-many in the digital world. And the theory was, if we have a mission objective in the public sector, but we can dispatch the entrepreneurial spirit of the country in many, many, many ways, we could advance that mission objective much better and faster than if we simply did it on our own. That's been a philosophy of mine. And to manifest that, when President Obama said we're going to create this open data movement, I had felt that for healthcare reform, the most valuable asset on healthcare data sat in Baltimore. It was the linked Medicare claims database. So if you were a doctor in Northern Virginia and you were wondering, am I delivering the best possible care for my patients? Well, when they come to see me, they are great. It didn't matter that they didn't call me 2 weeks later when they were having trouble and they ended up in the emergency room, got admitted, got discharged, went to another place, got readmitted, and had all these litany of negative things, but they never called me back. So I don't know. I don't know what happened. Okay, we have a fragmented healthcare system, not an integrated system. So we have way too many silos. So each individual silo says, well, for the thing they came to me for, I treated them. But as a system as a whole, we spend too much. We get but not for the quality that we expect for the money we spend. The Medicare database has all of that feedback. I can tell you as a doctor, this patient that you treated had the following things happen to them that may or may not have been under your watch. And oh, by the way, comparing you with a similar doctor like you who was taking on more of a quarterback role, coordinating the care, they had basically the same kind of patients, but they cost society a third less. That's the kind of variation we're seeing, Bruce, about a third of spend. CareJourney was born out of the idea that we should be democratizing, not constraining, this data asset. It costs money, time, effort. You got to apply for a license. It took us 2 years. We've licensed the Medicare database under the terms of a program that came out of the Affordable Care Act. And we aspire to use it for purposes of provider performance management. We want to create a rating system, a 5-star rating system for every doctor, hospital network in the country. And to do it based on data, not just on Yelp reviews or social media feedback. And the good news there is it's an idea that's resonating. We've recruited about 90 members and growing. We grew in the midst of the pandemic, which was awkward because, obviously offices were shut down. This was a challenge for healthcare, but we saw a 50% bump in terms of demand because people wanted to come out of the pandemic ready to understand what does a digital healthcare system look like now that we've learned we can do telemedicine, we can engage people in new and creative ways. So I'm honored to be a part of a team, 75 strong, growing, who wake up in the morning every day looking for ways we can make the system better, born of what we've learned in the data, and then to democratize that as widely as possible. And we love that we have partners from Microsoft to individual community health systems to small physician groups that are taking on risk, and you can serve anyone in between. So thanks for the chance to say a few words about what we do, Bruce, but many more of these opportunities abound. We should all think of this as the moment in time to create multiple weather economies like we saw with the Weather Channel. We might get into that before we wrap up today.
Sure. Maybe I should just ask you a topic that's quite, central to today's headlines, and that is vaccination rates in the United States. Yeah. And the Biden administration has come out and said that they now think it's unlikely we won't make the 70% target by July 4th that we had aspired to. And we know that vaccine hesitancy is significant across the United States and more so in some states than others. And in many instances, it appears to tie to obviously individuals, if they're ever going to come kind of over toward getting a vaccine, it's going to be more through the influence of other individuals in their community, maybe their pastors, in some communities, the people they rely on and they trust. It could be relatives, it could be the barber shop, it could be what have you. One of the thoughts has been, is there publicly available data that could be used to more effectively address these pockets of hesitancy in a way that's still respectful of personal health information? So how in your world do you navigate the tension between open data, publicly available data, policy objectives that government may have, and individual citizens' desire for privacy?
I am so grateful you asked this question, Bruce, because it speaks to one of the challenges to bring change in regulated sectors of the economy. Now, I have a specific answer to your question, but I want to give you, what does that mean? Context. In the digitization of sensitive data world, we launched 3 initiatives in 2009, 2010. Just to benchmark us a little bit. One initiative was we put $10 billion to modernize the electrical grid. We called that the Smart Grid Initiative. And that would mean that instead of an analog meter in everybody's home that a person had to come to check to see how much your bill is this month, we now have these machines that communicate over network systems that could basically give you effectively a real-time sense of your usage. When we did that, we said the data belongs to the consumer. And if I want to use that same feed to basically adjust my thermostat so I can hit my spend goal instead of, oh my goodness, it was a bad air conditioning month. Man, the bill went up 30%. I could have a little bit more information, a little bit more control. So we asked the energy community to come together and reach technical consensus. And with very little effort and barely any regulation, we were able to get the utilities, even Dominion, our friends, said that you should be able to log into the Dominion portal and access the data and do with it what you want, okay? And so we created technical standards around that, but the adoption worked pretty well. In the banking industry, in Dodd-Frank, the regulations for banking, we said every consumer has the right to connect an app of their choice to their checking account. You might be familiar with mint.com or whatever, you take a pick of fintech products. That now, again, Congress gave the power to the Obama administration to write a rule demanding that banks open up the data to third-party consumer apps. We never wrote the rule because banks adopted it on their own. So now we get to healthcare, which unfortunately has had the opposite experience. We named a few pieces of information that had to be in the medical records that we subsidized $35 billion to bring to market. And we encouraged the industry to take that itty bitty kernel to start and to build the entire medical record, including your vaccination status and other factors, so that they could be made available for data sharing. 10 years in, the industry didn't add a single piece of data beyond the minimum data the government mandated to be made open. And so we walked into this and so we had not one, not two, not three, 4 pieces of legislation dating back to the Bush administration, then Obama, several in Obama, saying open, 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 open. And the industry never took it upon itself to do that. So finally, we're getting there. Now, getting back to this issue, one of the challenges is that who knows whether your neighbor got the vaccine? The state knows because it maintains a master immunization registry. Bruce, how many state registries can you log into to see whether or not you've had the vaccine? I can't log into the state to look at my own history. You can't look at yours. By the way, California just announced a week ago that every resident in California through a smartphone can boom, 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 3 clicks, and they get all their immunizations for their entire family completely free on a device of their choice. And they could go to a church or a person they trust who sponsors a service like this to say, hey, I want you to be the custodian of my information to help guide me as my Sherpa. And so we saw states take leadership. Colorado's launching, California's launching. I haven't heard about Virginia yet, but fingers crossed, we do it here too. So we've been battling this vaccine hesitancy issue where people that want to know who in my church hasn't been vaccinated. That's a query. How do I run that query? Who's allowed to share that information with me? Can I go to their health plan? And can the health plan share that with me? We have answers to these questions, but we've not been able to motivate stakeholders to help. We don't have an all hands on deck approach like we need to. We have a marketing campaign. Speak louder, use more social media, throw a TikTok thing, throw a prize, do a competition. But we lack the simple, who are your trusted partners today? How many schools with a student clinic, colleges, we just talked about Mason, UVA, Virginia Tech, how many of them know the vaccination status of their students? Could they ask permission to learn about it to be able to provide that kind of feedback? There's so many opportunities where you ask the question, what should the policy be to answer it? What is the technical means by which we execute? And then how do we have a feedback loop to track, so-and-so did a great job unlocking their data. We, in the pandemic, I volunteered for the mayor of Chicago. They deputized one of the local health systems to be sort of the data hub because the IT systems in the state and the local governments weren't ready to handle all the data sharing. So they just deputized one who said, just put me in. I volunteered to help. Overnight, their race and ethnicity data was 40% complete. It went to 95% complete when they could merge medical records with the lab results, and on and on and on. So Bruce, these are areas where I wish 3 years ago we had the infrastructure ready So we would have been able to do so much more in the pandemic to honestly identify areas where we could have applied more management rigor to reduce the unfortunate mortality rates that we saw.
Well, and the question probably is on the minds of a number of the folks on the webinar today, which is, will we have learned from this experience, and will we direct more resources toward public health priorities to kind of close the gaps and the seams that have been laid bare during the pandemic between the various levels of government, and whether those are gaps or seams in systems, or whether it's more from a policy perspective, because often it's more maybe the policy or the regulatory framework isn't supportive of where you're trying to drive, directionally in terms of data sharing and so forth. It's not that the technology is no longer, the technology is lagging. It seems like technology is caught up in many ways.
This will be its own webinar to debrief on the public health data situation. But let me just give you a couple perspectives. The easy answer is we need to fix the regulations, data sharing is not allowed, blah, blah, blah. Wrong. The laws on the books are absolutely clear. The public health agencies have the right to collect data on any public health emergency. And if we are unhappy with the amount of data collection, we could have a debate on constraining that right, but they have the right. So this is an area where we've had the right to collect the data, organize the data, and make better use of it, but we've lacked the technical means. And we've had a scenario, and this is a fascinating one to me, where it's funny, the Trump administration was attacked, and I'm a Democrat through and through, and I'll be happy to comment on all the policy issues that I disagreed with the previous administration on. This one was mind-blowing to me. The CDC was asking for basic information. 95% of all of the COVID cases that were reported to the CDC in March of last year, the very first report, 95% had no clinical records. They just saw name, has COVID.
Wow.
Are you kidding me?
It's amazing.
This is 2020, and we don't know basic information about the patient's medical history to know whether or not, and of course we had the data.
And how much money went into meaningful use?
Well, this is the part that was like blowing my mind. And so, but now here you get to the nature of the problem. Well, we mandated a single interface to public health for labs. So a lab knows the name, the lab result, and maybe that's it. And so that thing was pumping out electronic information, and it's better than the faxing and whatever they had in years past. But that was a very blippy thing. The bigger question is, when can I connect that to the full medical record that's sitting in the exact same IT system? Innova has a lab system, but it also has an electronic medical record. It's sending it from the lab system. What about this thing right over here? How is this not attached? Because this was hard-coded, and we'd have to go back in and manually upcode the interfaces. And so the good news is we've now realized we have to modernize with APIs, data sharing. And that would mean that the app from CDC that was authorized to pull it out of Innova, and I don't mean to pick on Innova, it could have been Virginia Hospital, said anybody, can basically today only pulls this bit, but with one digital update, I want to pull that, find me all patients with COVID and give it to me this way. It should be as easy as connecting an app to Google Maps or something. And so the 21st Century Cures Act calls for this. We're going to modernize. I think anyone who's listening today has to ask yourself, the days of custom managed interfaces should be over. We need open, reusable APIs to get data in and out of agency systems, and that we've got to make that commitment to modernize. And that's clearly what's going to happen on the other end of public health.
Well, well said, well said. I want to, if we can now, turn to, and I like your idea, maybe a separate webinar on the topic related to information sharing in public health and the future of public health, a very timely one, and one that many companies in the Washington market are probably quite interested in. Talk to us about leadership. Take a moment and compare and contrast your leadership styles, if you will, in the public sector and the private sector. And like I said, I've always admired your ability to traverse both and to do extremely well in both. It's a real skill and maybe a superpower even. What are some of your lessons learned from your experience? And, talk about how you lead maybe differently and the importance of collaboration and consensus building maybe in one versus more of a command and control style. But give us some of the secrets to success.
No, you have nailed it. So, there's a certain amount of humility. It is theoretically true that if you take on a role like you report to the governor, you report to the president, one could heavy-handed say, and thou shalt do what the president says, and one could certainly attempt to create a bit of a, kind of a command and control architecture. My philosophy was we would get more output if we had more of a collaborative spirit. And so the idea there was create the enabling ingredients for collaboration, and then encourage and inspire and connect dots so that the party isn't like responding to a mandate or a compliance, but is seeing it as a mechanism by which they can accomplish their business objectives. My number one leadership authority was really drawn from David Bradley, who's my mentor, founder of the advisory board company, Atlantic Media leader. And David had a number of idioms, but one of them was surplus value, that the party that you are working with should get more out of the conversation than you. And I had that philosophy. So I would sit down with secretaries and more often deputy secretaries to listen to their challenges and say, oh, by the way, we do have this open data directive. You have to open up data, but let me hear what are the things that you're grappling with. Might there be projects that leverage open data to advance your cause? And having that buy-in and to see that surplus value resulted in more agency kind of running beyond what we would have expected. Now, we had our share of sort of check the box, Debbie Downer types that didn't want to do much, and we didn't really yield the hammer to like beat everybody up. So we probably had a lot of failure. My theory on the innovation side is you want to tolerate a lot more failure, but you want to inspire and push to go further. So collaboration was a critical variable in the public sector as I saw it, especially with a new role. Like, who are you and under what authority are you talking to me? And I still have a budget. I don't need to talk to you. So we sort of had to have that multi-stakeholder collaborative spirit. The other lesson to me was, talent wins, best team wins. And so if you can recruit people to take on important roles, that's the ball game. And so I kind of was a little bit later to that than I should have been. I had the blessing of Todd Park, who was my successor at HHS. And when you have a world-class talent like Todd co-founded Athena Health, Castlight Health, had been an entrepreneur many times over, wildly successful. When Todd was in a position to lead, you see the case study of him far exceeding expectations, or Peter Levin at the VA, and I don't want to name everybody, but there's a set of high-quality talent. That means that if you can field the right team, almost anything there's nothing that's insurmountable. And so we learned later in my tenure that one of the best ways to bring about change is you get air cover from the budget, the sponsor of the project, so cabinet member, agency director, whomever, and then you field a project under the Amazon ethos of 2 pizza teams, where you get a few folks from outside of government that may have technical talent or other talent that may not be resident in the agency. You get the world-class talent of the agency that knows the subject matter better than anybody. You marry the two into a team. And our first project was to create an innovation pathway in the FDA for new medical devices. A second one was to modernize the immigration application process. We couldn't change the law, but we could certainly, here's a goofy one, Bruce. There was a lot of talk in the Trump administration that Melania, as you remember, the first lady, she was given an O1 visa. That's an exceptional visa because she was a model. And so, in the law, it says if you're exceptional ability, you can qualify. What does exceptional ability mean for business? So we said, let's put a little SWAT team. Let's start to think through what are the attributes of an entrepreneur that's exceptional. And we started opening up more entrepreneurs coming in through that O visa that previously was for baseball players and models and things that people otherwise intuitively knew. And now we got more of the folks in the entrepreneurial community. So we call that startup visa, but really that was leveraging the existing law, just smarter implementation. So best team wins, spirit of collaboration where there's surplus value. And obviously, in my view, you want to create a really positive atmosphere where there's a great amount of feedback loop and camaraderie. And so I did, in many ways, find the role of cheerleader in chief to kind of get teams celebrated and to feel like we're making progress and to move stakeholders. So I enjoyed taking on those roles. And the private sector is a little bit more. I want this, I want you to do by that, because we have a little more structure. Not as many voices at the table to give feedback. We have a little bit more, I want to do this, but I like the multi-stakeholder side of the public sector.
Excellent. Well, let's do this. We've got a few questions, and then I do want to make sure that we wrap up with one final question about the National Capital Region. Your vision, what's your vision really for I'll throw the question out there, and you can either address it now or we can go to some of the Q&A.
Yeah.
I want to really understand your view of the National Capital Region. What's next for it? How do you envision the future? There's such investment being made here. It's the locus of so many great things that are happening in terms of technology and public-private partnerships and collaboration. How do you see that future, and how can the NVTC help? So that'll be something for you to contemplate. Let me take a moment and go to a couple questions from the Q&A so we don't miss those opportunities. The first was asked quite some time ago, and that is, there are numerous certifications that are either now required for vendors to receive extra valuation points in the RFP process, like CMMC, CMMI, and ISO, and et cetera. It can be expensive for small businesses to obtain. Do you have any suggestions on, which ones should you go after first? What are the most important certifications for small businesses?
Well, so this is a complicated subject because there's process and then there's substance. And in my view, and again, I credit mostly my brother in arms, Vivek Kundra, who was CIO. I think cloud certifications, understanding how to do work in a modern way and validating that you can be a part of that ecosystem. There's a ton of applications that need to be adopted by the government that will need the kind of content knowledge base that the vendor ecosystem should support. I think we're still many years ahead of us on cloud migration. In addition, I think this notion of the certifications where you're doing a lot of bespoke application development and you're trying to prove that you're a good developer and you can, generically speaking, make software that's not crappy. I think in between, there'll be more developer platform plays that would allow you to mostly configure platforms as opposed to build de novo. Again, I don't want to speak for every agency, but I think we're seeing the platformization, the low code, the build the workflow applications to meet your requirements, 80-20 rule. There may be something about maximizing the value of these pre-built capabilities that have higher productivity gains than simply saying, I'm a great infielder with high talent. That may be, we should have a separate discussion about whether the SBA can be an advocate for certification, for the manpower skills needed to compete. That actually should be a policy question. Can the SBA facilitate a program at Mason and others to get folks to get the credentials that otherwise are hard to get? But I think these other two options are viable paths to be successful that may not be quote unquote expensive, but have a high ROI associated.
That's great. That's super advice, and thank you for that. And born from personal experience and insight. So let's turn to another one. Could you offer any insight as to the impact of the delay of the release of the president's management agenda on government agencies?
So this is a complicated subject because the management agenda, really at the heart of it now, is performance.gov. What I mean by that is the management agenda has a lot of highfalutin frameworks. You got to do these, prioritize this, equity in hiring. There'll be a litany of process steps in there. But in my opinion, the material point for innovators in the region is, what are the management objectives for each of the agencies? And they have to be captured on performance.gov. So you might want to mine the performance.gov metrics that are critical to your agency's performance and say, how will the project you want to bid on or maybe propose that hasn't even come out yet, or part of the technology modernization fund, to say, I see that you've got responsibility to move the needle on this, and they're already public. let me help you achieve that goal with this investment plan. And that may be a better way to go than worrying about the process priorities, which will come when the Biden administration feels that they're ready to put their
But with those objectives that are published, that are available for the agencies and so forth, tied to some of the broader themes you mentioned at the very beginning, like improving digital services for Americans and so forth.
Yes, and this is the fascinating nature of our government, right? You have Congress that says we want to improve digital service. And so the response to that in the management agenda is here are the 14, I think, or so agencies that do direct service delivery. And so on performance.gov, you'll find something like IDEA implementation, which is the Integrated Digital Experience Act, I think it's called. And that will tell you exactly what the digital service measures are for the SSA, IRS, et cetera, that have that. And you can track, oh, they've got a room for improvement. Let's go propose a solution to help them get to those objectives better, faster, cheaper.
May not be fair to ask you this, but the questions are now coming in a little bit more. Take 30 seconds, because I want to leave just a moment for the vision for the region. 30 seconds on what do you think is needed for our global partners to better resolve health issues? Because obviously the pandemic not only showed where we need to improve as a country, but also it's part of it. It knows no boundaries, right? And any thoughts there?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, step number one, I think we're doing the right thing on making sure we vaccinate the world. It is remarkable that we grabbed the DNA of this virus and within a matter of weeks, we had the mRNA built, and then we had to spend all that time testing it. So putting the machinery of innovation into the hands of the global market, that's a role for the US. And so we're seeing that come back. I also think there's an open question about the pandemic-related signaling. How do we capture early signaling that there's been some public health emergency outbreaking in XYZ part of the world? We need to strengthen our syndromic surveillance muscles that involve more than just traditional electronic health records. And we're going to have to think about non-traditional mechanisms so that we can track it. And then obviously, globally, we had to figure out what short of lockdowns might work to contain. And so we'll have a lot of lessons learned there. But clearly investing in public health, now we realize, isn't a nice to have. It's critical for our economy.
And it seems a huge opportunity for leadership by the United States. So with that, why don't you bring us home? I know that we're at the top of the hour, and hopefully I don't have to put another quarter in the machine to keep this thing going just for a couple more minutes. I beg everybody's patience with that. Talk to us about your vision for the future of the region, the role that the NVTC can play. And let me feather in the last question that came in, which is, what are some of the maybe constraints that you're discovering that are prevalent in the DMV region as it relates to attracting and retaining talent? Like, is housing a challenge? Are other issues related to that? So
you got it. I think I'm a Steve Case disciple. His book, Rise of the Rest, implied that the next chapter of economic growth will be people that have excellence in a given sector married up with the digital muscles to bring it to the next generation. Mm-hmm. We are in the problem-solving business in the region. We've got to marry problem-solving and modernization. We need to be the home for that menu of services. It may not necessarily be government vendor solutions. It may be societal problem-solving opportunities. But that, to me, is where we'll see a lot of muscle. It's public-private collaboration and regulation with a product management mindset, productizing the work we're doing, which leads to the hamstring. Our issues today are that our technology workers are more heavily services oriented than product developer oriented. And as such, the economics of the model, it's a little bit more of a labor play than it is a sustained economic model where a little bit of effort can result in outsized returns. I think the more we position the economy towards products, the more we'll see significant wealth creation opportunity, which will then beget more talent to come to the region, which will then beget, and of course we have societal issues. We got to keep up with the affordability issues, but those are secondary to making sure that we've got the conditions for outsized economic returns for the labor and talent we put into the region. That's my hope.
Fantastic. And that's a great note to end on. Thank you so much. I don't know if I'm turning it over now back to Taryn or anybody from the NVTC, but I will tell you, it's been a fantastic discussion. Aneesh, always energizing to see you. Thank you. And on behalf of all the attendees, we look forward to more opportunities to interact with you and to now take some of the wisdom that you've offered and put it to practice. So,
we're all family. Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thanks, Taryn. Back to you.
Yes, thank you, Aneesh and Bruce, for that fantastic discussion. You guys were amazing, as always, so thank you very much. And thank you to our attendees for attending today's virtual event. Please stay and network with everyone in the social lounge, and I hope to see you at a future event later this year. Hope you stay safe and healthy and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.